trolling Senator Elizabeth Warren as a snake, and in post after post, labeling Mayor Pete Buttigieg a rat. Two victims of this tell CNN they were so afraid of the online attacks they faced, they don't even want us to describe the circumstances for fear it would start up again. They both just questioned the politics of Bernie Sanders in a public setting, and their personal lives were exposed and attacked.
Well, just what Nick said, I think that's right. I mean, there is no Democratic establishment anymore. There's not even a Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party is a meaningless notion that the party, like the Republican Party, has been hollowed out and privatized to a large extent. There are Democratic elites, and so when we're talking about the Democratic establishment, we're really talking about a number of, a bunch of people that Nick also knows well, which really means Democratic donors.
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
The election in 2020, without hyperbole, is going to be the most important election this country has undergone in over 100 years. Not a joke.
This November's elections are more important than any I can remember in my lifetime, and that includes when I was on the ballot.
There are just 8 days left in what is the most important election of our lifetime.
Where did you guys come to a conclusion about why Clinton had such a hard time just owning that she did something wrong with the email server?
You know, I know that Russia and other forces would love us to have a debate. This is exactly what they want. They want us to have a debate about the internal structure of Hillary's campaign, what's true, what's not true. And I'm just not going to play that. I'm sorry.
Yes, we came, we saw, we died.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It's like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
You know, people have said, if you look at, for example, the heat that ended up around the bend the knee, Colin Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. Many smart people have said it actually was not a threat. The Russian bots started taking out. Really? Yes.
But I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should
this
be
is
running.
Not about.
If you're like me, one of the millions suffering from pain caused by migraine, Nurtec ODT may help. It's the only medication that can treat a migraine when it strikes and prevent migraine attacks.
Trump and the Republicans lose on Tuesday, and if they lose badly, it's not going to be because of the left, whatever that means. It's not because of the 50 Antifa black mask guys who roam around the United States breaking windows and committing mayhem, most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Rudy Giuliani, there's only 3 things he mentioned in a sentence: a noun and a verb and 9/11. I mean,
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
And I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out.
and now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. If we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
I can't do it. We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, welcome. Let me just adjust this down just a little bit. Hopefully I can do that without messing up my signal. Welcome, citizens of the internet, to another exciting edition. I got this new microphone stand here. Another exciting edition of the Politics Show. And I want to start today by talking about the Democratic Party, because I have a lot of Democratic Party content for you today. But I was listening to the response to Tucker Carlson's interview with Mike Huckabee and the types of people who were responding to it and the types of things they were saying. It got me thinking about the political parties in general and just kind of how the dynamics have shifted over the years. Because I was a guy who, of course, voted for Obama twice. And I really wanted to be a part of the Democratic Party, especially when Obama was running and when Obama won. I remember I sent them an email because at the time I built websites and did graphics and stuff. And I was like, I'll volunteer for you guys. I just want to help people get health care. And as you could imagine, the Democratic Party did not respond to me. And fast forward a few years, I have a cousin, a relative, put it that way. She's not actually my cousin, but she's a relative. And she went to school for political science. So she has a bunch of friends who run in the political world. And one of them worked for Bernie Sanders and then went on to work for Pete Buttigieg. Not what it is. And then ended up going to the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, ended up getting a job offer from them. And when this happened, as they were kind of reviewing her application, I remember my relative telling me that her friend had been approached by someone during that process and asked how she knew me personally, because we were connected via social media. And we're not super close, like I know her through this relative, but we're not super friendly. The interesting thing about this person, I'm not going to say her name. I don't want to get her in trouble. I think she's definitely a good person. She's not out to subvert America or anything. But the interesting thing about this person is she's not a United States citizen. She's not an American. She's married to an American. She's married to a guy in the military. But she was not born in the United States, nor is she. She was educated here. I don't think she even lives here anymore. And I believe she. Don't quote me on this, but I do believe she still works for the DNC. So that's kind of an interesting, anecdotal story. But I tell you this story because I believe that there was, a very visible change in the way the Democratic Party operated during the Obama years. And I think it obviously started during the Clinton years. But Obama came to power, Obama came to power on the back of a guy, Rahm Emanuel, who's a very well-connected political figure in Chicago circles, who has a brother, Ari Emanuel, who runs WME, which is one of the biggest talent agencies in Los Angeles next to CAA. And so Obama, at the time when he was running, I think it was probably a lot more obvious than we wanted it to be that he was going to sell us out to the same corporate interests that the Republicans always sell us out to. But we wanted the hope and change to be real, right? And so the Democratic Party just during the Obama presidency really morphed into what is today, I think, pretty much just a party of like wealthy arms dealers and political types, liberals who are kind of like part of the power structure, so to speak, media people, professors, weapons contractors, people around Washington, D.C. who believe that the United States being the world police and enforcing our kind of military prowess on other parts of the world is for the good of mankind, like those kind of people. And it's whitewashed, or however you want to call it, pink washed or DEI washed in this notion of like, oh, look, it's diverse people murdering, this Libya or, dropping bombs on whatever country X, insert country here. And so I think that the reason for the last 10 years that the Democratic Party's kind of core platform has just been Trump is bad is for this reason, because they really don't stand for working class values. They don't stand for anti-imperialism or anti-war values. They don't stand for any of the like free speech rights they're pretending to now. So it's been interesting to kind of watch the degeneration of that party, because I used to consider myself a Democrat, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat as me. And first when they cheated Bernie in 2016, I was one of the people who, of course, just regretfully, but bought the line that, oh, okay, this is what we have to do. We have to suck it up and just accept that the party cheated and vote for the candidate they chose, which at the time was Hillary Clinton. So I think at that time, a lot of people, myself included, were like, okay, yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll back Hillary because, even though they cheated, we just can't let Trump win. And then Trump won, and the Russia thing started happening. And that was the point when I went, okay, wait a minute. At first, I kind of believed it, but over time, I started to realize, okay, this is the Democrats' excuse for why they lost. It's not reality. Trump isn't really secret Russian spy. This is the Democrats trying to justify their terrible loss after they shat all over their base and the Bernie people, which was really the reason they lost. A lot of people who would be Democratic voters just went like, why should we go to bat for you in this election cycle? I was not one of them at that time, but I regret that. I respect to you if you were one of those people who during that 2016 election sat out or voted third party or didn't, because I voted for Hillary Clinton. I fell victim to the simping. And then Russiagate, when Russiagate kind of took off and became a big media thing, at first I kind of went, wow, really? And then I started reading about it and I went, okay, this is the Democratic Party making an excuse for why they, why they lost to the spray tanned orange game show host, right? And so the next cycle, when they ran Joe Biden, I voted for Trump out of spite. I lived in California at the time, and after what they did during the primary, crowbarring Joe Biden into again, cheating Bernie Sanders, I was just like, nope, not doing it this time. Having Trump is not as bad as supporting a party that continually does this to their voters. And I bring up this history right now only to say that I believe the Democratic Party is a dead party. I don't think that it I think it serves a very marginal group of people. And I think you can see by the way that there are people kind of pushing for Kamala Harris to be a thing again online, that it's basically a party of consultants who they don't want to win, because if they win, then they actually have to do things to please the voters. And they can't just point at Trump and go, Trump's bad, Trump's bad, Trump's bad, which is what they do now. And they make a ton of money off it. And if you look at, there's the Midas Touch, for example. Midas Touch is a great example. These are the scummiest people. They're like liberal consultants. Their entire life revolves around Trump and everything what Trump says and does. And they're grifting. They're right-leaning conservative, grifting types, grifting off of liberals or anti-Trump sentiment, basically making a ton of money doing it, feeding this like anti-Trump rhetoric to morons who think that, everything was fine in the United States until Trump came along and invented lying. And ever since then, it's just been, Trump is the problem. He's not a symptom of the problem to those people, right? They're vastly misled. And I'm going to get into, again, my broadcast lately has been almost like the Apologize for Trump tour. But as I've explained multiple times, and as I'll explain again right now, I'm trying to see things outside of the lens of mainstream kind of commentators and media, because I know that they're full of shit. And so for me, it's kind of like anything I see in the press that's repeated, this includes, of course, like online influencers. And this is true for conservative influencers too, because they're full of shit, just like liberal influencers are online. Alex Jones is out here, defending Trump and the Epstein files and all this stuff when he was one of the first people to really push the idea that there was an elite cabal of PDF files out there, And so the point I'm making, I guess, is that whenever I see a narrative forming, a popular narrative forming, and I see a lot of people repeating that narrative, my first instinct is to find out why it's not real or why it's bullshit. Because that has, just like with Russiagate, like with the pandemic, like with the Iraq war, like with the Vietnam War, going back through history time and time again, these narratives that get spun in the press whip people into a frenzy to think a certain way. And then once it's already, once it's long gone and time has passed, then they go, oh, whoops, we got it wrong. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to be duped by that again. So I think that a lot of the, there's a lot of terrible stuff the Trump administration is doing. I don't want you to get me wrong. I'm not out here defending bad stuff they're doing. And we're going to talk about some of that too. But I do try to view things from an angle that you're not going to see in the mainstream press. So think about it that way. And, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. I'm not above being corrected. And, I would rather be, I'm not a stubborn person. I'm not Ben Shapiro out here. So definitely nowhere near his audience size, even though a lot of that is bots. So the cover today for today's broadcast is Masters of the Media. And I say that because I think that Trump gets a little bit of an unfair, much like George Bush, I think Trump plays dumber than he is. And I think he is a very media savvy person. And it's one of the things that liberals and kind of his opponents underestimate about him. And we're going to get into it. But I'm going to say this first and foremost. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, because if I am wrong, I will eat crow and admit it. But I do not believe that the Trump administration is going to attack Iran. despite all of the rhetoric you see in the press, and this goes back to what I was saying about the press earlier and how they push narratives, I don't think he's going to do it. And I'm going to explain to you why. But, obviously, if you listen to the media, they are already acting like it's a done deal. Oh, it's going to happen tonight. They've been saying this for like a month and a half now. It's going to happen tonight. It's going to happen tomorrow. And there's a huge military buildup in the Middle East. And I think that the reason for this is, first of all, we have unlimited amounts of money for the military. So, spend all the money. They're going to spend as much as they don't give a shit about, moving a bunch of ships into the region that aren't going to do anything, is my point there. Because a lot of people are like, oh, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars a day to keep this presence in the Middle East. I'm like, they don't care. There's an unlimited budget for war in the United States. So my take on why they're doing that, honestly, knowing Trump and who he is and where he comes from, is you're using it as negotiating leverage. And I think also there's kind of maybe a dual purpose here, in that they're also doing it to kind of ease our buddies in the Middle East along, who their prime minister is in the United States constantly whispering in Trump's ear. So I think this military buildup you're seeing in the Middle East is kind of a bargaining chip for the negotiations, and having that kind of present threat there, I'm sure Trump believes gives him some kind of an edge in negotiations. And that's the way a guy like him thinks. And listen, if I'm wrong about this again, I will come out here and say, fuck, I was dead wrong. But I don't believe that Trump is going to attack Iran. Now, a lot of things could happen. He could hedge his bets, and someone could accidentally hit a button and shoot a missile or something. There's a lot that could happen. But I don't think he's going to do this, and because I think he knows that, first of all, the retaliation isn't, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. So there's a lot of talk about the retaliation capabilities that Iran has. They've been working with Russia and China, and I think he cares a lot more about his legacy than he cares about appeasing Netanyahu or the donors. And that's just my take. I could be totally wrong about this, but I want to show you this clip again. And I showed this a couple weeks ago, but I'm going to show you a couple clips actually, just to reinforce my point here. And this first one is this guy, Alex Craner. And let's just listen to some of it, and I'll kind of comment as we go through it. But he makes some great points in this conversation. And again, I showed these last couple.
Iran. That's another place where if you look at the news cycle, you get the impression that Trump is playing this evil game of waging war on Iran. He's going to regime change Iran and on and on and on. But none of that has happened. And about a week ago, I think it was Monday last week, I was on a podcast with Professor Glenn Deason, and we talked. He asked me about this, and I told him, look, he's not going to launch an attack on Iran. Everybody was saying that he was just about to bomb Iran, like in the next 12 to 24 hours. And I said, no.
They're saying that now. Again, it's kind of like what I was saying with the media manufacturer. They can will shit like this into existence, or probably have been able to in the past with other presidents, just by keep saying the same thing. The boats are there. Just keep saying it, and it's going to happen. And this is from like 2 weeks ago, so nothing has changed in that regard.
He's not going to do it. And the way I've been able to predict this, I mean, now people will say like, oh yeah, but it's because the Iranians neutralized Starlink, and then Saudis and Qatar and all of these countries denied airspace to American aircraft, so he couldn't, and on and on and on. Okay, fine. The outcome is he didn't bomb Iran. And then if you rewind the clock to June of last year, same thing. It was all building up. And on a few podcasts, I said, either he's not going to bomb Iran, or he's going to do a fake war, meaning, some token missiles and bombs, a friendly handshake, a polite response, polite retaliation from Iran, saying, excuse me, terribly sorry, we're going to bomb your base in Qatar there. Please be sure to evacuate so there's no casualties. Thank you very much. And then the Iranians launch a retaliatory attack on that base. No casualties reported. And then Trump thanks the Iranians for the courtesy and says, we obliterated the nuclear program in Iran, right? Everybody knows that that's not true, but Trump for weeks is insisting on that word, obliterated the nuclear program. Why? The reason why is because that nuclear program was the West's justification for going to war against Iran. So if you obliterated the justification, no more reason to go to war against Iran. And so the whole thing died for the next 6 months. And then if we rewind the clock farther back to 2019, we remember that in June of 2019, the Iranians downed a drone in the Persian Gulf, an American drone. And then the pressure mounted on Trump to launch a war, to go to war against Iran, to launch a bombing raid. And Trump said no. So that was the third time pressure built on him to go to war against Iran. And
so I'm going to let him finish, Kanye style here, but I wanted to say too, this guy's not an American. So also, he's not a political guy. And so I think this show is called Commodity Culture. So shout out to them. Subscribe to them. I mean, they don't need my help, but subscribe to them. They put out good content. But I think these guys are watching finance and markets. They're not watching like Democrat, Republican arguments or any of that kind of stuff, or midterms or any of that like political nonsense that really is kind of meaningless for the most part. They're watching markets. And one of the big reasons Trump is not going to attack Iran is because they'll close the Strait of Hormuz and oil prices will shoot through the roof. He cares about money and business and economics, I think, a lot more than he does about, Netanyahu. So I think that he might be kind of walking this tightrope now of like, again, that's why I believe that they're building up all these carriers and stuff in the Middle East to kind of, be like, what's the word, belligerent and like, hey, we can shoot at you, for the sake of appeasing Netanyahu and, his people who want a war clearly with Iran and the US to back it. And also as a bargaining chip with the Iranians to say, oh, look, we're lined up outside. You better work with us type stuff. But the overall point I'm trying to make here is I don't think money knows any loyalty to country or party. So, I think his opinions and his kind of theories are hold a little bit more water for that reason.
Third time he kind of ditched it. But what was very indicative in 2019 is that after he said no, Anonymous leaked a whole bunch of cables between the British Embassy in Washington and the Foreign Office in London. And from those leaks, we were able to work out that it was the British Embassy who was leading the pack in lobbying the Trump administration to start bombing Iran. It was Ambassador Sir Kim Darroch who has been pushing a lot of these what he called Trump whisperers to influence Trump to order bombing of Iran. And then when he said no, Kim Darroch fired off a whole bunch of cables to London berating Trump, calling him incompetent and inept and unreliable and all these things. But he said, if we surround Trump, if we flood the zone around Trump with these Trump whisperers, that the next time Iran does anything unseemly in the region, that they will be able to tip Trump over the edge and launch that war. So the whole story tells us that it's the British who are, again.
So pay close attention to that, because these were the cables he's talking about from the Brits. And he said, there's going to be another incident that they can use to push Trump over the edge. And I have a Scott Ritter clip I'm going to show you in a second about that.
Manipulating the United States into waging a dirty war, ultimately to the benefit of their Zionist project, which is Israel.
So it's interesting too, because a lot of people want to point to Israel as the kind of controller, the puppeteer behind U.S. foreign policy. But based on what this guy's saying, it might be the Brits. It might be the EU. And if you look at the history of conflict between the U.S. and other forces in the world, it does make sense. World War II, I think we were largely pulled into that by the British, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was a big part of why we got into that war, and probably the first World War II, World War I and II. I meant two as in TOO2, right? So that's an interesting point, but let me let him just finish up here before I show you this next clip.
And why does the Zionist project exist in the first place? It's because it's their beachhead to dominate the whole Middle Eastern region and its energy resources and its trade routes. You know, the Suez Canal, the future pipelines from Qatar over Syria and Iraq and Israel to Haifa, the plans that they had. And so in this past 12 months, Trump has pretty much demolished all of those plans. And all of them set Great Britain at a disadvantage. It's weakening their position. And there's also the question of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the Balkans. We're going to shorten that one, but basically, the British were rigging the region to create the second front in the conflict between West and Russia. And Trump.
So interestingly, too, there's a thing going on there that I was just listening to before I came on that I didn't get. This is a quick sidebar. There's a whole thing going on right now with Bosnia and the Ukraine. And basically, Ukraine is withholding oil from Bosnia because they work with Russia or something, or they're getting energy from Russia. Now Bosnia is saying, we're going to cut your electricity off unless you open this up. So there's a whole other so the EU is trying to keep the Ukraine war going around Trump, you know, who's trying to end it with stuff like by doing stuff like that, you know. And so I think this guy's onto something.
Pretty much went there, told them, get lost. There's a new sheriff in town. And since then, Bosnia and Herzegovina has been pacified. And I have this from a member of the cabinet of Republika Srpska firsthand.
So this guy is Bosnian, I believe, or from that area, from Eastern Europe.
And I asked him face to face. He explained all this to me. It seems that what Marco Rubio told to the Senate last January is exactly what the Trump administration is doing now. It's hard to read because it's extremely chaotic. Trump's own public statements, press releases are insane, but I think that they're deliberately insane because he just creates hysteria. And then when people latch on to the last dumb thing he said, he's already doing something else.
Because he is a master of the media. And I want to show you one more thing that I think is relevant to this conversation about Iran. And this is also from a couple weeks ago, but listen to what Scott Ritter says right here, because this is
something that was
thing
cooked
that
up in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, Lindsey Graham has admitted it. This is something that Netanyahu and Trump cooked up when Netanyahu was visiting Mar-a-Lago. This was all planned. There's extensive planning going on between the Mossad, the CIA, British intelligence, Dutch intelligence, and every intelligence agency in the world that has been lined up against the Iranians. You know, and yet the United States didn't pull the trigger until it was too late. And I just have to sit there and go, Trump knew what he was doing. I mean, it seems to me that Trump set up Lindsey Graham, set up Netanyahu, set them all up because they shot their bolt. The Mossad network that was used is gone, finished. I mean, the Israelis panicked in the end. They when they lost communication with them,
that was the next attempt to get Trump into a war with Iran. And he came out and said a bunch of strong shit on TV. He came out and said, you know, stop killing people, Iran. But what Scott's saying here,
tried to shove in a whole bunch of new Starlink, the communication kits. And the Iranians were just sitting there waiting for him to come in and go, thank you very much, thank you very much. Because the Iranians broke the code, got in there. Thanks to the help of Russia, by the way. So it's all over. That entire network's gone. It took decades to build that network up. It's gone. So Graham knows what happened. There is no capacity to, replicate the opportunity that was lost. Now, he's trying to be nice and say it's not Donald Trump's fault. It's 100% Donald Trump's fault. And you have to ask yourself, was this deliberate? Is it just incompetence, which I can also accept, or was this deliberate? A setup so that Netanyahu and Graham and everybody else stops talking to him about overthrowing the Iranian regime because they no longer have the tools to do so.
So there you go. There's another proof I think I have in my take that I don't think the Trump administration is going to attack Iran. I think that they are using the media and using, kind of belligerent actions, so to speak, to wag the dog and give kind of like I said, walk a tightrope. And I just think, he's using a lot of the buildup for negotiating leverage and to pacify Netanyahu. And everyone, if you notice in the media is screaming in unison, he's going to bomb Iran, he's going to bomb Iran, he's going to bomb Iran. And Iran is going to be more likely to bend on certain things with that leverage because they're under threat. I think he thinks that. Maybe not. I don't think that they are going to bend on much, to be honest, because I think they're more prepared than we would like to believe. But you have to admit that sculpting reality also is what the USA has done well for decades. And Trump, people forget he was a real estate guy, yeah, but he was a TV guy for years. He ran The Apprentice, which is one of the most popular shows on TV. This guy knows how to work the media. And the US in general, to the larger point, worldwide, we're the generator of pop culture. That's how we have controlled the world historically, and you can say, it's our movies, our music, our TV shows. That's what the world consumes, our media. And, sure, there's Korean dramas and there's foreign movies or whatever, and there's Japanese animation, and there's stuff from other countries that breaks through. But as a general rule, the US dominates media culture throughout the world. So that's always been our strong point. And I think that Trump and Rubio are intentionally using media hysteria, like Alex was saying here, as a tool of subversion. And you also have to remember that Rubio, until recently, was in control of USAID. And I know he kind of handed it off to this other guy, but that didn't just go away. There's lots of government money available for propaganda to shape public perception. And I can guarantee you the Trump administration is using it. Maybe it's under a different name. And, people try to act like Trump is this big dummy. But I want to show you before we close this out, just a couple of clips that prove he's a media savvy dude. Listen to this. This is
You always have. Got Greg Norman's here. Now, social media is the way to go. I've got over 100 million people watching, and social media to me is the way to go. And this way, if somebody's not treating you properly, or if you do have indeed fake media, not all of it's fake, some of it's fantastic actually, but you can just sort of circumvent. But
so this is from around 2015. I think this was before he became president, actually.
I don't know if you find that, but I find social media is the way to go between the different forms. There are many different forms, but it's a fast way of getting the word out. I really think it helped today when, on healthcare. I think it's a great way to communicate, and it's a modern way to communicate. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So here's one more clip of him talking about Twitter specifically.
Trump. People asked me to run. People asked me to run at real Donald Trump, and letters and everything. We have 22.5 million people between Twitter and, can you believe it? I have a lot of people, they say, don't use Twitter anymore. Why? I got 22 million people between that and Facebook and Instagram, and I'm a very modern person in a way, right? But think of it. You know who says don't use Twitter? Your enemies. Or people. Why wouldn't I use it? Why wouldn't, if I have all these millions of people? And it's a great way to get a message out. So when they write falsely or say something totally false on the Today Show or Good Morning America, I put out a tweet, and you'll see all over television, we have breaking news. And I may be tweeting from bed, okay? It's true. It's instantaneous. If I put out a beautiful, long, perfectly scripted press release, like I did yesterday, nobody puts it out. If I put out like a 140-character tweet, they go crazy. We have breaking news. They break into every story. So you got to use it.
So that also, you see that, because this is old footage, from, I believe that one is from like 2017, not long after he got elected. And after that, you'll remember they banned him from social media. They blocked him from social media around the January 6th stuff because he was saying stuff. And, looking back on a lot of that stuff, it's like he was right about a lot of stuff that they, were trying to forbid him from saying in the public sphere. So I just wanted to make the point again that I don't think, despite the media kind of marching in lockstep around this idea that it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the repercussions for it happening are much larger than a lot of people would expect. I also think there are other voices in the back rooms, giving him an alternative perspective now. Whereas maybe in the first term, Trump, he was completely surrounded by neocons. And now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of neocons. Marco Rubio is a neocon. But I think there's also other voices of dissent in the room now that might pull him aside and go, yo, like this isn't a good idea. So I want to discuss next the Board of Peace as kind of a, another layer to this whole theme about the media and being able to change things that have been long standing. And, so one of my friends and colleagues the other day sent me this note and they were like, hey, what the hell, 10 billion for the Board of Peace? What is that? And first of all, what's the military budget now? Like $1 trillion or something. So my mind was like, well, 10 billion is like really not that much when you think about it. But also I started to think about it, because again, when there's a narrative formulating a popular narrative, my brain instantly goes, okay, why is this narrative formulating and what's the alternative behind it? Because almost always when a lot of people start repeating something, it's bullshit, right? And so my thought process is this. Big money is always advocating for war. War is good for business, and that's why, war with Iran, war with Venezuela, war with Greenland, whatever you want. It's good for the investor economy. And so I believe that, and this is just my theory based on things I've seen and kind of the way I think that these people operate. My theory on the Board of Peace is that Trump is trying to make peace profitable for these interests, because that's honestly the only way you're going to avert wars is you give the capitalist class another way to make a profit. And as we know, money controls everything. It's not, I don't like it. Show me a petition to sign that ends it and I'll sign it. But that's the reality we have to deal with, and that's the thing that kind of, I think, frustrates me sometimes about the left or people on the left who are, it's like you have to kind of, I always quote Donald Rumsfeld, but you have to go to war with the army you have, not the army you want. You have to cope with things pragmatically in the reality you're in. If you want to change the system, you're going to have to work, unless you have the ability to completely overturn it and create something new, which is, I haven't heard anyone yet that has a good plan for that. And I'm not saying that voting is going to change anything, but I do know that money controls politics. It's undeniable. And so if you want to change anything, probably the best way to do that is divert the money that would otherwise go to a big war into something else, right? And so that's what I think the Board of Peace is. So let's kind of let's read a little bit of the Wikipedia just real quick. And of course, this is government propaganda, so we'll view it as such. But Board of Peace is an international organization with the stated purpose of promoting peacekeeping around the world, established by Donald Trump and led by the government of the United States. The board is named in the United Nations Security Council resolution as a body tasked with overseeing the process of the Gaza peace plan. The Board of Peace was proposed in September 2025 and formally established on the sidelines of the 56th World Economic Forum in January 2026. So one of the things I think is interesting about this, and we'll go to this right here. In early January 2026, it was reported that Nikolay Mladenov, former United States Nation's Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, had been chosen to serve as the POP Director General. And this is the part that really got me. Mladenov subsequently, it's a Russian name, so he's Eastern European or Russian. I think he's from Bulgaria. We'll get into that in a second. Subsequently held meetings with al-Sheikh and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On the 11th of January, it was reported that Trump expected to announce within the week the individuals with whom he'd appoint to the BOP. In response, Hamas spokesperson Hazim Qassem called for the expedited establishment of the NCAG. I don't know what that means, and they didn't really provide any links for context. So, footnote there. Getting down here, Argentine President Javier Milei, of course, he's a U.S. fucking So okay, a couple of things about this. Let's go back up to this guy, because who is this guy? Nikolai Mladenov, Bulgarian, a Bulgarian politician and diplomat, served as the Minister of Defense for Bulgaria from 2009 to 2010, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Prime Minister, Government Borisov. Prior to his cabinet appointments, he was a member of the European Parliament, representing Bulgaria. He later served as United Nations on diplomatic roles, early life and education. In January 2026, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Mladenov had been designated as a Director General of the proposed United States-led Board of Peace, a body envisioned to oversee the implementation of a Gaza ceasefire and related transitional arrangements under a peace initiative. So that's a red flag right there, obviously. And here's another thing that's interesting. From 1996 to 1998, he was a program director for the Open Society Foundation, which is the Soros thing, right? A program coordinator for the social department in the World Bank for Bulgaria. So anyway, obviously this is not perfect when you don't really have the Palestinians represented here. And you have the Gaza rep being a Bulgarian guy that Netanyahu appointed. That's a red flag. But there's also some positive stuff in there. For example, Russia was invited to participate, which made everyone else really mad that the United States is trying to normalize relations with Russia as the EU is trying to continue a war with them, which, again, going back to Craner and what he was saying, a lot of people believe, I think, that it's our friend in the Middle East that kind of drives American foreign policy, when I think it's more likely that it is actually the UK and the EU that are kind of able to push us into these wars. So, I'm not saying this is the best thing ever, but what I am saying is it might be a creative way to avert war by giving greedy warmongers, a way to make money through the Board of Peace. And if it works, then Trump can go on Truth Social and point to the Board of Peace preventing wars with Iran and, advocate for his Nobel Peace Prize and all that kind of crap. So I want to stress here as we move forward that while I might be making a case that's alternative to the popular narrative or the mainstream press, I am by no means saying the Trump administration is all fine and dandy and everything they do is great. And one of the areas where they're doing things that are not great and using the media, again, to spin their narratives is with Cuba. And if you watch, CBS News with, Barry Weiss's CBS News channel, they act like, oh, well, it's socialism. Look at Cuba. It's failing because socialism, completely ignoring that the U.S. has a gigantic blockade and is preventing, oil and goods from getting into Cuba. And there was an interesting kind of back and forth that occurred on Twitter. Let's put it that way. Before we move on, I want to add this to the conversation because I don't think I have yet. And this is kind of how a lot of the world views what American foreign policy looks like right now. And I don't think that they're completely wrong either. Hopefully, we see a change for the better in that department. But going back to Cuba, I want to show you this kind of Twitter spat that happened. The rest of the show today, just to warn you, a lot of the rest of it is going to be Twitter spats, and we have some really good content for you here. So, going back to my initial kind of monologue here about how terrible the Democrats are, this is another good example of why people hate the Democrats and kind of like the liberal celebrity class that, blindly follows the Democrats because Trump, oh my God, Trump is the worst thing ever. Oh my God, Trump. Oh my God, it's so terrible. This is Camila Cabello, Okay, well, sorry about this. Hold on a second. Wrong tweet. This is Camila Cabello. Raising awareness for the living conditions in Cuba. It's been 60 years of failing dictatorship and an oppressive regime. The Cuban people are suffering in an echo chamber where no one can hear them because to speak is to risk your life. Many people are starving, looking for food in trash heaps. The only way to survive is having relatives who ship you boxes of medicine because not even the hospitals have medicine. Now, again, why is that the case? It's not because socialism, which is what a lot of people want you to believe. It's because there's a blockade. The US is blockading. And this is the part of our foreign policy that a lot of Americans don't understand and don't see, is that this is why there's refugee crises. This is why there's, millions and millions of undocumented or illegal, whatever you want to call them, people flooding into the country because they have no other choice, because we are ruining their economies. Because socialism's so terrible, we can't just let it fail on its own. We have to blockade the country and make it fail. So celebrities like this can make statements about it on Twitter and act like there's some kind of good person, So the way that this came about is you had Hassan, who I don't normally follow nor don't normally agree with, because I think he's one of those sheep herd guys who at the end of the day, he might come out and say good stuff like this, but he'll point you back to the Democrats when it comes time to vote. Just like Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball and all those hacks, Sam Stever or Stan Cedar, whatever that guy's name is. And so this, to me, this attitude, this Camila Cabello kind of tweet, again, is the Democratic Party of today, and it's why the Democratic Party is a dead party, because these people are so blissfully ignorant of what they're actually advocating for. She just thinks, oh, well, people are hurting in Cuba, so I'm gonna say, we got to help Cuba. Just like last week when I was talking about young blood supporting regime change in Iran because he saw a video of a girl on social media. It's probably AI. And so this is the response to Hassan calling Camila Cabello gross. Calling a Cuban woman gross for advocating for her people in Cuba. How dare you? Clutching my pearls so hard right now. And so I chimed into this conversation and said, she's using identity politics as a shield to protect imperialism. You love to see it. This was probably one of my most popular tweets in a minute, because I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna cry about it, but I'm pretty sure I'm shadow banned for the most part. And this complete lack of perspective and the Democrats using this mentality to whittle the party down to the three people that still think like this is why they're not a valid party anymore. That's not to say that Democrats won't still win elections, the ones that have money behind them and are good, because a lot of them do have a lot of money behind them, because Trump is terrible. We got to do something about Trump. But you should see how ridiculous some of the responses to this got. And here's one. Cuba is imperialist too. Yes, of course. How did I not see that? I mean, think of all the countries that Cuba's invaded in the last 20 years. There was and there was
you go back to your home on Whore Island.
And this right here is just beautiful. She's predictably lived in Miami since she was 6. Of course she loves imperialism. So again, this is the complete failure of the Democratic Party. At least, and the Republicans are not better. Listen, I'm not sitting here going like, oh, vote for Republicans now. I've never been for Republicans. But the difference is that there was an upheaval in the Republican Party, and they couldn't stop it from happening, and it came through Trump. Now, Trump is an imperfect vessel for this upheaval. You know, he's one of the few people with the money and resources to get into the mix and actually successfully beat an establishment candidate. But on the Democratic side, the opposite happened. You had this upheaval happening, but the Democratic Party leaders and the elite, and there's a guy in my goddamn intro. If you watch my intro, I forget the dude's name, but he says, and this was, you know, in 2016 or 2018, or this was like years ago when this guy said this, but he said the Democratic Party is a non-existent party. It's basically just a shell for donor money. And he said this 10 years ago, and these people are still pretending that this is a thing, that, you know, oh, we got to cancel people who call out ridiculous defense of imperialism, and people trying to cancel them for identity politics. And if you think I'm kidding, this is another example of a tweet that I just bookmarked because it just shows how desperately disgusting the Democrats have become. You know, there are factions of the Democratic Party that suck Bernie's ass. And remember, he did this oligarchy tour, but in this video, he's talking about the establishment. And this guy says, every time Sanders says Democratic establishment, I hear him saying the N-word with the hard ER. Yeah, because you're a consultant. You work for the Democratic establishment, and your job is to smear their opposition as racists and white nationalists, whether they're progressives or Republicans. Your job is to smear Democratic opposition as racists. And when that's what your party is built on, you no longer have any value. When your party's entire existence is built on Trump is bad and you're a racist, if you disagree with us, there's a very few people that are going to ally with you on that message. You're basically setting yourself up to be a permanent minority party. And again, I think the Democrats are fine with that because people like the Meiselas brothers who run Midas Touch make a ton of money just going like, look at how bad Trump is. Oh, Trump is so terrible. Vote for Gavin Newsom because he'll lose and won't do. And if he wins, he won't do anything for the working class anyway. Look at California. The guy has a track record of not doing anything for the working class. The guy has a track record of being a complete corrupt shill who cheats on his wife. And, you know, and I think that's why a lot of the moral judgments that Democrats make about Trump fall flat, because they're the party of Bill Clinton and the party of Gavin Newsom. And it's clearly, you know, if you're going to make that accusation and stand on some kind of moral pedestal and point down at people, you actually have to live those values. And the Democrats don't. The Republicans don't live those values either. And that's why they were a minority party. And that's why they lost continually to Obama and progressives in the 2010s, because they pretended to. And you saw this dynamic play out again with the Super Bowl, with the fake halftime show for, you know, pearl clutching racists who can't hear Spanish for 20 minutes. You know, that is the dying wing of the Republican Party. But fortunately for the Republicans, a different group of people has kind of taken over. And in the Democratic Party, that's not the case. It's the same people it's always been: the James Carvilles, the Neera Tandons, the Ben Rhodes, the Obama era people who took over from the Clintonites. They're not going to let, you know, the Bernie people come in and change anything. And so you have, as imperfect as it is, the right wing populist uprising that ended up winning the elections. And then you have the Democrats continuing to do stuff like this. Do they protest anyone who isn't black? So Cory Booker got protested by pro-Palestinian activists, people who are against the war in Gaza. And these guys are out here going, it's racists. These racists. And who does this sound like? They sound just like Netanyahu and the ADL and the Zionists. So now you have the left and the Zionists basically using the same tactic. And again, these guys are not the left. I should say the Democrats. the Democrats using this tactic to stomp the left, and the Zionists using this tactic to stomp, anti-Israel sentiment within the Republican ranks and the Republican side of things. And it's sad. It's sad and disgusting and pathetic in a lot of ways. But there was a actually very prescient, I love to use that word prescient, example of this at work again when I logged into Twitter last time. And I have to say, there's not a lot of people from the Bernie era that I've befriended, other than maybe like Jimmy Dore. And, there are a few other, Misty, Comrade Putin. Misty is Putin's comrade, or what's her handle? Sarcasm Stardust, one of the best accounts on Twitter. These people have been consistently outraged and consistently angry and consistently skeptical. They're the people who, like Jimmy Dore was one of the first people who criticized AOC back when even I disagreed with Jimmy at first, when it was like, oh, it's sexism to criticize AOC or you're racist, But one of those people who from the beginning has been sufficiently militant and sufficiently credible, and I might not always agree with every take that he has, but he's always on the right side of history, I will say, and that is Nick Cruse from Revolutionary Blackout Network. And from what I read today, he might be disbanding RBN and starting something new. Excuse me. But I wanted to show you this real world example of the left self-immolating. And this guy right here, first of all, I've been kind of like on the page with this guy for a minute, back and forth. He calls himself Californian, and his handle is actually Undercover Brother. Interesting, right? Maybe he is a Fed. Undercover Fed dividing the left. So he says, Nick basically said, can the gay community give us all a pass so we can call Nick Fuentes an F word? I never have the urge to use that word until I see Nick Fuentes speak. No, I would disagree with that. There's plenty of times I've had the urge to use that word outside of Nick Fuentes. However, I'm not anti-gay. I'm for gay marriage. I'm for gay adoption. I'm for gay rights. I'm for gay people should have everything that straight people have. But that doesn't give them the ability to censor people. Like, I would never tell a gay person they can't call me like a cis male or something. You know what I mean? Hurl all the insults, and vice versa. You shouldn't be able to tell people they can't say the F word because it offends gay people, or you can't say the Z word because it offends pro-Israeli people. These are all very similar principles. And yeah, it's hurtful, whatever, but those people can tune it out, or they can choose not to interact with Nick Cruse if it really hurts their feelings. Doing this is counterproductive. This is why the left doesn't win elections. So this was my initial response. The sad, pathetic pearl clutching you're doing here is why the left never wins anything. Thank you for uncurling from the fetal position long enough to post this. I'll let you get back to crying now. Because that was my angry initial response. That's how I initially feel when I see shit like this, where it's like, dude, really? You're going to completely ignore everything else this person has ever done in their entire life because they did one tweet that upset your sensibilities. Do you really need to nerf the entire world for your fucking intellectual fragility, you pathetic sack of clown shit? And Armchair Commie, who's usually an account I disagree with, he's an asshole, so I can have permission to use homophobic slurs. If the only way you can insult someone properly is to lower yourself to their level, the solution isn't asking for a pass, it's to expand your own vocabulary. And all these people with their self-righteous outrage sound just like the conservative right did when they were like, oh, Jesus Christ doesn't approve of your abomination, your gay abomination. Now you're the morally preening, self-righteous cunts that the right used to be. Congratulations, liberal free thinkers, for becoming First of all, the caricatures that conservatives painted of you, that's the other thing that frustrates me the most about this, is because I always considered myself a liberal, like free, like, hey, if you're not hurting anybody else, you can do what you want type person. And then you have this come around, and it disgusts me to no end that people are so whipped into a psychotic emotional frenzy by Donald Trump that they completely forsake everything they once stood for to, act like, oh, he said the F word, so everything he did in his life is now unworthy of being considered because he hurt my feelings. Pathetic. I meant every word of that. So I also want to show you I had a valid question, and I probably should have asked this valid question before I posted my angry, fetal position thing. But I think this is a good question, and I could have asked the same question about the Z word and people who support Israel. But I said, honest question, if you call a white male a cracker-ass cracker, a definite slur, I can't be part of the cool, hip, socialist club anymore? That's really how it works? Just to illustrate how juvenile and schoolyard this is. And again, when I really start to think about this and re-examine these interactions, I have to believe this guy is an op, and I have to believe people like this are an op to keep the left divided and fighting with each other over nonsense instead of uniting and working together with conservatives or with people who might say the F word sometimes to get health care. How would that be? Oh, I'm not going to work with you to get health care for the general public because you said something that hurt my feelings. Think about how stupid that sounds when you actually verbalize what's going on here. It's pathetic. But back to Twitter here. This was kind of the culmination of my thought process. Because this is what he said. If you feel the urge to use and comfortably toss around slurs, you're not a communist nor a socialist. Nazi and fascism could be considered slurs. You guys are very comfortable throwing that around with anyone who disagrees with your worldview. Oh, that's a Nazi. That guy's a Nazi. And so I said, you can't be part of my special little group of snowflakes isn't a strategy that wins elections. This is the number one reason Donald Trump is president. And it is. And they're still doing it. Because this makes people this is one of the reasons I've grown to like Trump, because he just laughs at these types of people and goes, oh, your feelings hurt. I don't care. F you. I'm going to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Like, what? Who cares? That's so dumb. But also it made a lot of people mad. And it's like, these people deserve to be mad and just steaming pissed in their stupid little brains, their stupid little skulls and their tiny little, because again, if you're this guy right here, if he is serious about this, he's not he should be ignored. His political opinions should be ignored because he's either actively working to subvert left political movements or he's just a retard. It's one of those two options. There are no other. Gay Barista Paul, one of the best accounts on Twitter, period, ever. I honestly don't mind him using the word. I don't like censorship of any kind. I hope you don't block me. And he says, I have zero intentions of blocking you. Of course, because that would be bigotry for you to block a gay man who disagrees with you, right? So I had to show you this. Undercover brother blocked me, of course, because, I asked him a question he couldn't answer that shook his worldview. And when you do that, no one's like, you don't have to debate people on social media. Why have an honest debate with people when you can just block them and retreat into your nerfed intellectual bubble where no one challenges your views? And I honestly like that about social media. I like that people can, protect themselves from views that hurt their feelings, because then they have no reason to censor anyone, even though they're going to keep trying to do that. So Nick also chimed in, and this is another one of those, divisive, I'm a real leftist account. I'm one of the hip leftists who decides who can and can't be part of the club accounts. And this guy says, any gay comrades who find humor in using their identity to hurt someone else needs to reflect on why they hate themselves that much. You know, Jewish people do it all the time. It's part of their comedy routines. Black people do it all the time. White people do it probably more than anyone. I do it all the time. There's a lot to laugh about white culture and how ignorant it can be. There's a lot to laugh about at any culture. And if you're so sensitive that you can't handle it, get the fuck out of the political debate because you're clearly not mature enough to be part of it. Nick says, I'd much rather be in a community with all my gay comrades who can find humor in that joke rather than you annoying woke scolds. Maybe because they're ordinary people and now annoying and I think he meant not now. I think he meant, so let me reread that with his intention because I think that's a typo. Maybe because they're ordinary people and not annoying, performative, miserable woke scolds like yourself, which is just hitting the nail right on the head. And so this was the latest because I put this together and right before I came on, I saw this tweet and I had to throw it into my presentation. But this is the most recent development here. The girl canceling Nick from RBN literally left their group so she could get a job with the genocidal Democrats. But apparently Nick is a problematic grifter for making a joke despite being a lifelong anti-imperialist communist. So many leftists don't care about class politics or imperialism whatsoever. Nick says Afeni tried to smear Rome as a sexist and left RBN when she realized we weren't getting rich. Then she took a job with the Democratic Party and claims I'm the grifter. So again, the Democrats at work. And of course, given all the evidence I just showed you, this makes total sense. Of course, she's a Democratic operative. That's what the Democrats do. They use racism as a tool to cut out people from their movement and whittle it down to almost nothing, which is why it's a failed party, I believe. I don't think, like I said, I don't think Democrats aren't going to win elections still, but the party itself is basically just a fundraising entity for groups like the Lincoln Project and, you know, the Midas Touch and all these conservative right-wing grifters who switched sides when Trump came in and decided to like actually change some things and not, you know, whether or not he's a total neocon, I think is still up for debate, but definitely not looking good right now. So, but then it doesn't stop there because this is, again, another attempt by the Democrats to whittle their party down to nothing. This is Joe Rogan who endorsed Trump. It's overwhelming to me sometimes at nighttime. I can't wind down because there's too much news, too much fucking madness. We're about to go to war with Iran. How does it go? What's happening? And this guy says, Trump is what happens when American men, white mostly, again, making a, you know, whittling it down to a racial thing, and white men are evil. Vote. American men vote the way a lunkhead podcaster suggests they should, and now the lunkhead wonders how this happened. You motherfucker, you. Fake outrage from a gigantic vagina man who clearly just, you know, I'm sorry, vaginas. That was actually derogatory towards vaginas. This guy is much worse than any, vaginas are great. This guy is much worse than any vagina could ever be. But he has no spine. He's a Democratic puppet. And this was my response. I love how Joe Rogan's suddenly at fault for the failures of the Democrats, who lost to a spray-tanned game show host twice because they suck. You will blame literally everyone but your own party for their failures. What pathetic clowns you and people like you are. And just to close this out, I want to show you, you know, a grain of hope, because this is, I think, the future right here. Brianna Joy Gray retweeting Thomas Massie, far right-wing MAGA guy, was, you know, now that Trump's not doing MAGA things and, you know, become Netanyahu's bitch, Thomas Massie is obviously kind of diverted from Trump and he's staying true to his populist values. And a true populist left-winger like Bree is like, he's cooking. And so this is the divide I think I wanted to illustrate here that you have with Nick Cruse. And look at the Democrats trying to eat their own. You know, 5 minutes ago, they're calling you a racist for not voting for Kamala Harris. And now they're trying to cancel Nick Cruse because he said the F word And he didn't even say the F word. He asked gay people if it was okay for him to use the F word to call Nick Fuentes the F word. And it is okay for him to use that word. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to have my stream turned off, because I know how YouTube can be, especially when you're already walking on eggshells with them like I am. But this is the future right here. The parties are done, as we can see. The parties are finished. Stop thinking in terms of left and right, because it, like, the idea that like these socialist communist groups, almost all of them are completely infiltrated and fake. As we can see, they're ready to cancel a black guy who asked if he could call a right-wing commentator a gay slur, and they're losing their mind. He can't be part of our group now. You're not part of our special group anymore, Nick Cruse. You hurt my feelings.
Why don't you go back to your home on Whore Island?
What's the weather like on your planet?
Fuck you, Cap. Well, fuck you, Cap. I don't want.
I hate the Democrats. I hate the Democrats. Like, I dislike the Republicans, and the only time I've ever voted for Republican is when Ron Paul ran in 2012. But I hate the Democrats. I have a visceral hate for them that is just unbridled because of what they did to Bernie Sanders, because they crushed their own movement and lost to Trump by their own volition. They had a guy who was filling stadiums full of excited voters, and they crushed that movement and told us all to go. And they're doing it again. They're doing it right now. They're like, oh, let's run Kamala Harris again, which again is why I have to believe that the entire thing is just one big grift now. If they would run Kamala Harris again, or even suggest it, that tells you that they're not serious people. They're not serious about actually winning an election. It's a bunch of consultants who know that they can go, you're a racist if you don't like our person because she's a strong black woman. She's actually one of the dumbest people ever to appear in political discourse. I don't care what her race or gender is. She's stupid. Thank you, Nick, for giving me something to rant about. Fuck these people. I hope they all go away quickly. I hope they all curl up in a ball in the corner of their rooms and cry because someone said the F word and it hurt their feelings. Moving on. Let's get to some real shit. Tucker Carlson's interview with Mike Huckabee. Now, if you had come to me, even 10 years ago and been like, bro, in the future, Tucker Carlson is going to be the foremost journalist, the most rebellious, the most against the grain, the guy who actually might change things in political discourse through his reporting and journalistic efforts, I would have laughed in your face and gone, what's wrong with you, you dummy? Tucker, the bow tie guy? The guy with the bow tie from Crossfire, that guy? That guy is going to be the biggest. You're high. I want some of what you're smoking. That is the reality. That is the reality. And this interview that he just did with Huckabee proves it positive, because there's no one out there right now that's upsetting the power structures in both parties more than Tucker Carlson. No one. And the status quo, the establishment, no one in media, period, is actually doing that more than Tucker Carlson. And here's the thing about Tucker that people don't think about, and one of the reasons I like him so much, he has access to the White House. He talks to them. This is from Jewish Insider. Tucker Carlson makes second visit to the White House in 2 weeks. Second White House visit. Carlson with President Donald Trump for a lunch on Friday was pictured in a photo with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. Uh-oh. Carlson is at the White House spreading his message of anti-Semitism to foremost authorities in our government. He must be stopped, of course, obviously. Well, Tucker did this interview with Mike Huckabee, and I have a couple choice cuts for you today. And the first one here, he asks Mike if the American people's opinion on foreign policy actually matters. And here's what Huckabee has to say.
Like, how much does it matter what Americans think?
Well, it matters every bit what Americans think. That's why Americans vote. It's why Americans have the opportunity to have free speech. We want them to have that.
Okay, so what percentage of Americans support a war with Iran?
I don't know. Do you know?
I do. I think it's around, I saw the numbers yesterday. I think it was like 21%.
Okay.
Is that enough to have a war with Iran?
We don't live in a world where you have a poll taken to find out whether our policy should be a particular direction. Because
so this is what they do every time too, right? They say this, they said this to the Bernie people. Oh, you can't just get health care. We can't afford that. We can't just do that. Like, this is the way things are, and we do it this way because it's just how it has to stay.
But I thought you just said that
that's direct democracy. No, we care deeply about it. But on the other hand, do we make the decisions of foreign policy and even domestic policy based on
we
what
care
the
deeply
latest
about
poll
it in
number
what
is?
sense? If we're ignoring it, then in what sense do we, quote, care deeply about it?
Well, I think we care deeply when we see there's a threat.
No, but about Americans' opinions. So you've got 350 million Americans. Yeah. They voted in this last election on the basis, in part, of the promise no more wars. Okay, so now we're about to have a war. Looks like 80% of people are against it. In that range, let's say 70%, but nowhere near majority support for this war. And it's not direct democracy, but it is a form of democracy. It's representative democracy.
The ultimate form of democracy in our system, in a republic, because we're not a true democracy, we're a republic.
Exactly, right? It's a mediated democracy.
It'll be an opportunity for Americans to vote if they think that we've made the wrong policy decisions. I personally think the president is making the right policy decisions.
But I guess, but you just said it matters deeply what Americans
We'll see if he thinks that if the president doesn't attack Iran.
Think, and if the overwhelming majority are against it, in what sense does it matter? Because what I hear is it matters what they think, but it really doesn't matter what they think because...
No, you take it in, you certainly ingest that.
And then what do you do with it once you ingest it?
Then you make sure that you have... No,
you just gotta... It goes out the other end, obviously.
No.
So 2 things about this. Number 1, these are liberal accounts retweeting this Tucker Carlson clip. This is Gabriel DePaul, who I've said one of the best accounts on Twitter, absolute best. If you don't follow him now. And the Tennessee Holler, which is a liberal-leaning account, retweeting, this stuff. And I want to say one other thing about this, because watching this made me realize we forget that this is how journalism is supposed to be. It's supposed to be conflict. It's supposed to be tough questions. It's supposed to make these people sweat. Tucker Carlson is actually asking this guy tough questions and following them up with tough questions and making him give attempting to force him to give clear answers. That's how journalism was supposed to be. That's how it used to be. But for the last 10 or 20 years, it's just been people licking politicians' ass on TV. And so when Trump came along and told the press to fuck off, it creates this dynamic where in some ways, it makes people think the press is actually doing their job because they're opposed to Trump. But then you see interviews with, these pro-war acolytes like a Lindsey Graham. No one's putting Lindsey Graham through the ringer like this. And props to, well, I don't want to say props to, but like some credit due to Huckabee for showing up for the interview. But again, this is what real reporting and actual journalism should look like. It should be uncomfortable. It should be difficult. These people should expect to be grilled like Tucker's grilling Huckabee here. So there was another incident from this interview that got a lot of news. and it was this one right here. Watch this. This is great.
To Genesis. Genesis 15 says it's Abram, it's pre-Abraham, it's Abram, receives from God the news that his descendants will inherit the land. And you tell me as the theologian if I'm getting this wrong, but from the Euphrates to the Nile. I think that's right. And that would include like basically the entire Middle East. That would be the Levant. So that would be Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. It would also be big parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It would be, I mean,
I'm not sure it would go that far. I mean, it would be a big piece of land, but here's the point.
It would be a lot of places that are now countries.
But this particular area that we're talking about now, Israel, is a land that God gave through Abraham to a people that he chose. It was a people, a place, and a purpose. We can look at it that way. Christian Zionism, I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have said it 3 times that God gave this land to this people. And so it is entirely fair for me with respect to ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times. And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis. You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all.
Okay, so to be fair to Huckabee here, Tucker's team conveniently cut right there because he does go on to say, you know, like, I don't think, like, that's not what they want to do. They're not trying to take, you know, of course that's what they're going to say until 10 years from now when they invade Jordan or whatever. But, you know, to be fair to Huckabee, they cut that clip right there on purpose to create controversy. Now, I would volunteer that they probably have the right to do that because they're mad at Huckabee because when they tried to leave the country, they were detained and interrogated. So they might have an axe to grind. And I show you that just to show you that also the news cycle here. Look at this is from the news cycle. Just a quick Google search. Why Mike Huckabee's interview with Tucker Carlson matters for the Middle East. Arab leaders condemn remarks by U.S. ambassador to Israel. U.S. ambassador causes uproar by claiming Israel has the right to much of the Middle East. So Tucker's stirring the shit here. And what leftist is doing that? What real left journalist? Maybe Glenn Greenwald, who's friends with Tucker, you know, but no one who's at the White House is making these points this ferociously to people that matter, like Mike Huckabee. And so you have to give Tucker a lot of credit for that. And again, this whole left-right thing just has to, this paradigm that we're stuck in, it has to go out the window because this is far more, you know, I asked the question a lot. Imagine if the Democrats had won. Imagine if Kamala Harris was the president right now. Would any of this be happening? Maybe on the right, but it would be dismissed as racism against the girl or sexist racism against the girl boss president. You know what I mean? They would have that ability. Look at what they're doing now to people like Nick Cruse, you know? So again, while I don't want to be the apologize for Trump hour, I also want to say that I think that, you know, despite a lot of the bumps in the road and the bad things like the ICE stuff and all, and the stuff that's going on, you know, even Jimmy just did a piece about Trump letting the agribusiness continue to poison us through, you know, glyphosate. And it's like, so yeah, there's still a lot of bad shit happening, but by the same token, again, these popular narratives start to take root, and you can already see the backlash against this happening in the modern press with like, oh, Tucker's an anti-Semite. And I also ask you this: imagine if the internet weren't a thing, because if it weren't, all you would hear is that racist anti-Semite Tucker Carlson went at Mike Huckabee and hates Jews and hates Israel and is with the terrorists, works for Qatar. You know, they're not reporting. They're not, reporting any of this stuff. Like the thing about the Arabs being mad. I mean, I think Tucker did that on purpose. I'm sure that his team went like, oh, we got some good footage here. What can we get Mike Huckabee in trouble with? And rightfully so. He had them detained. I'm sure he was upset about the contentiousness of the interview and had them fucked with on the way out of the country because he has that ability. That's one of the small bits of power a guy like that has is, oh, yeah, he said some things to me that are, give him a roughing on the way out. You know, I could totally see Huckabee doing that. And I think that the last thing I want to show you is this because, well, not the last thing I want to show you, but this is, again, your boy Gay Barista Paul. And I'll let his message speak for itself. But let me show you this clip because this, again, is something interesting that we all need to understand is one of the reasons why the left doesn't do things like this. You need people with the balls the size of Tucker's to do this. But listen to what he says here.
I called a lot of people who know him and who are in regular contact with him. In fact, I went to go see some of those people directly. Please, can you help me get a sit down for 5 minutes with Benjamin Netanyahu? And I probably called or met with 6, 7, 8, maybe more people on this question. People in official capacities, people in the Israeli government. I know a number of people in the Israeli government, people in Israel, a friend of mine in California who knows him. I mean, I really, really tried. And I did so for 2 reasons. One, because there was a threat to my family. The Israeli government and Netanyahu himself tried to punish 2 members of my family. I won't be more specific, but actually punish 2 members of my family because he has said in public many times, believes in blood guilt, Amalek. You know, when someone commits a crime against you, you punish not just him, but his family, his bloodline. There's no idea that's less Western than that, more anti-Christian than that. Christians reject that. Netanyahu doesn't. That's why he's talking about Amalek. And he was going after my family, literally. So I felt very threatened by that. But moreover, I think it's bad for my country to have people using that kind of language. Round them up, bring them to the camps, gas chambers, Nazis, anti-Semitism. It scares the heck out of people. It makes people crazy and hysterical. And certainly in my case, none of that is true. I hate collective punishment. I hate attacking people on the basis of their bloodline. I hate anti-Semitism and anti-white racism and all of this, or any kind of racism, period. And I've said that a lot. So using that kind of language against someone who is not fundamentally your enemy, who just, in my case, I want Christians in areas controlled by Israel to be treated with dignity, to have rights. And I don't want the U.S. government involved in a war, a regime change war with Iran. Those are my priorities, and I've said them out loud. I have no secret agenda.
So again, what was the last thing he said there? I don't want a war with Iran. Where has he been? At the White House. So I do think that there's a good chance, and again, I'm going to reiterate my point one more time. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I don't think that the Trump administration is going to attack Iran. We will see. If I'm wrong, I'll come on the air and say I was fucking dead wrong. I missed it, you know. But I don't think it's going to happen. And I will say also, this as a final thought here. This is from the Hodge twins. Tucker has the Israel first crowd mad as hell. And I said, Tucker Carlson doing what I always hoped the left and Democrats would do. Always hoped that. And we saw in the last election cycle, they would not be doing that. And so, you know, as much as I hate to admit it, I'm hopeful that this populist movement and this kind of uprising, because you see it, some people are coming around. You see like the Young Turks. They still haven't forgiven Jimmy Dore yet, or apologized to Jimmy Dore yet and asked for his forgiveness. So I still hold them in some contempt for that. But you can see people like them starting to talk to people like Tucker Carlson and Bree Joy Gray, you know, retweeting Thomas Massie and saying he's cooking and stuff. So you see this paradigm beginning to deteriorate of left versus right, and people starting to focus more on issue by issue basis. And so things are, I think, in that respect, going in the right direction. And with that, that's pretty much all I've got for today. So I think, again, we'll see what happens. But based on all the stuff I've shown you today, I am hopeful that we don't get into a war with Iran. I am hopeful that Alex's theories on what's going on in Venezuela are correct. You know, if you listen to me at all, to summarize that, a couple weeks ago we talked about it. His theory was that the Trump administration took Maduro and left Delcy Rodriguez there to preempt a regime change by the OAS, the Organization of American States, which is an NGO that is controlled by globalists, not the United States. So this whole thing, you know, you listen to people like Steve Bannon and Alex Jones and the people who were big Trump advocates before he got into the White House. They've never stopped screaming about the globalists in America getting back to sovereignty and being a sovereign nation again, and not Team America that dumps our money into all these foreign wars all the time, which is what we have been since World War II. And one of the things Craner said, he referred to it. I didn't put it in the clip, but when the Trump admin came in, they said the World War II global order is done. We don't respect that. And one of the other things Craner says is he believes the Trump people are working behind the scenes with China and Russia to kind of decouple from the EU. And I think he also mentioned the Greenland thing is kind of a leverage for that to end NATO. And so again, I could be wrong about this, but I think that if you want to change the status quo, you have to use creative methodology. You have to kind of work around it in clever ways. And I do kind of see maybe that's what they're doing. So fingers crossed that cooler heads prevail, and we will see. Hopefully I'm correct and I'm not eating crow a couple weeks from now. And let us end today with something a little more lighthearted. Take you out, send you on your way with something a little more fun than the issues we've been discussing today. Let me see what I got for you today. This is the improvised part of the show where I have to find something interesting to play for you guys. Last week I played the Bernie AOC affair thing. What do we got here? What do we have? Liberal Boogeyman, I played that a lot. Pro-Ukrainian group. Let's play the Tim Dillon missiles clip, Christmas missiles clip on the way out. This is, again, going back to, our kind of self-righteous, self-aggrandizing mentality. This is Tim Dillon kind of showing this new missile technology that the Russians have, that we're acting like, isn't a big deal. And I think this is pretty funny. So we'll take you out with this clip, and thank you for joining me on my soapbox today. I appreciate you all. And, I would love to hear from you in the comments, and we will see you next time. Peace.
This is the first ICBM used in the history of war. I'm sorry, in the history of this war. Oh, wait, any war? The view of the intercontinental ballistic missile used today by Russia with multiple re-entry warheads on a city in Ukraine. It's possibly the first use of an ICBM in the history of war. Take a look at this. It is a beautiful, and by the way, send this to everyone as an e-card for Thanksgiving. Send it to them as an e-card for Thanksgiving. Take a look. Can you play non-copyrighted holiday music while this happens?
Yeah, I'll put it up on YouTube.
Because I think it's about attitude, and I think it's about the way we present something. I don't think it's about the raw facts. I think it's all the way you look at it. Perspective is reality. Is there a way to make Russia firing an ICBM, can we make it feel jolly? Can we make it feel nice? Do we have to focus on the negative aspects of it? You know, I mean, listen, remember when they were running articles in New York Times going, you know, nuclear war has some benefits and maybe everybody should get over their fear of nuclear war. And we're going to pull that article up in a minute, but they're genuinely sick people who are saying, well, nuclear war maybe wouldn't be the worst thing. So here we're going to play a little non-copyrighted Christmas music. Ooh, I like that. Now get the ICBM up. Well, this is nice. Now it feels like the Christmas show. This doesn't scare me anymore. It feels like a light show for the holidays. Keep playing that missile. I like this missile. This is a holiday missile. This is not a bad missile at all. What if they did it and it lit up the sky with like Frosty the Snowman? It's all about the way you look at it, folks. Nuclear war is a good reset. I think people in this country have decided in small rooms or in forests or wherever they meet and talk that nuclear war is actually a nice reset. It might get rid of a few of you mouth breathers who keep complaining you don't have enough money for canned food.